Welcome to the Filthy Badge series,
Police officers take an oath to protect and serve,
where we go precinct to precinct finding the dirtiest cops.
Deli joined the force in 2015, but tonight he's in jail charged with rape.
Some officers across the country are misusing that authority.
And now, the accused. In early 1993, Antoinette Frank applied for the New Orleans Police Department. During the hiring application process, numerous red flags had turned up. She was caught lying on several sections of her application and failed 2 psychiatric evaluations. Phil Scuria, who's a psychiatrist, examined Frank and advised in no uncertain terms that she not be hired, saying that she was shallow and superficial. However, the NOPD needed new recruits. In the early 90s, New Orleans was struck with a deadly crime wave of murder and drug activity in the city of New Orleans, and the force saw no reason not to hire Frank. The force might have also decided to hire her because the NOPD needed more African Americans on the force to relieve any racial tensions. Frank was hired February of 1993 and graduated from the police academy the same month. Apparently, on November 25, 1994, Frank handled a shooting in which a local drug dealer named Rogers Lakaze was a prime suspect. Lakaze was known in the area as a gangster with gold teeth and saggy pants. He even wore caps backwards. The Department of Human Safety and Corrections investigators believe that this was the first contact between the two. However, Frank would later state that she had actually met Rogers 8 months prior to the incident at Kemp. The association between Frank and Lakaze became noticeable when officers witnessed Lakaze driving Frank's Ford Torino, and they even saw him move her police unit when she was investigating the incident. During one occasion, Lakaze accompanied Frank on a complaint call where he introduced himself as a trainee. When Frank brought Lakaze around Kemp, she introduced him to the Wdsu as her nephew. Prior to the murders, people testified that Frank and Lakaze would pull civilians over in a police car and then rob them. Frank started abusing the badge. When the DOC investigation team interviewed Frank, she refused to discuss her relationship with Lakaze. The only thing she would say is what she was trying to help him. It was later revealed that both Frank and Lakaze may have had a sexual relationship. When she was asked why she continued the relationship, knowing Lakaze had a history with drugs and violence, she said that she would not disassociate herself from him just because of his past. The investigator later questioned Frank about buying Lakaze's 9mm ammunition from a local Walmart on the day before the Kim Ann's murders. She only stated that she was a police officer and there was nothing wrong with her wanting to buy ammunition. During her statement, she said that her and Lakaze were never dating, nor did they ever become intimate. Frank straight up refused to discuss anything about the Kim Ann murders, always telling the investigator to look it up in the record or she would assert her innocence. During her interview with the DOC investigators, she claimed to have a male suitor, but she refused to go into specifics because he worked for the department in later statements. It would appear that there were other people who knew Lakaze. 2 men known as John Stevens and Anthony Wallace testified about the case in court. It would appear that there would be other people who knew Lakaze. 2 men known as John Stevens and Anthony Wallace testified about the case in court. Stevens had said that one night Lakaze himself and Wallace were at a party. Both Stevens and Wallace were leaving the party. An altercation had occurred between Stevens and Lakaze, which likely led to them fighting. Wallace eventually got fed up and suggested they all leave. When Stevens, Lakaze, and Wallace drove several blocks away, they were pulled over by Frank, who was in her police uniform. When she got out of her police cruiser, She told both Stevens and Wallace to go behind the car. At this point, both men realized that Ksat, their supposed friend, had a gun. As Stevens was testifying, he said that Wallace had tried to rush Ksat, which led to both men fighting. Frank tried to interfere, but the fight eventually led to Ksat's gun being discharged. Stevens had gotten scared and decided to flee. A man suddenly appeared and tried helping Frank, grabbing both Ksat and Wallace. However, Frank explained that Ksat was the good guy, and it was Wallace who was causing problems. Wallace was restrained, and Frank called for a unit to come pick him up. Wallace was then charged with attempted murder and armed robbery. It turned out that the man who helped Frank that night was Irvin Bryant, a former Silver sheriff. He reported that on February 4th, 1995, he saw a stopped police vehicle with its headlights and taillights flashing. He initially thought that Frank was making a traffic stop, but as he moved closer to the scene, he witnessed Frank trying to break up the fight that two black males were engaging in. Wallace attempted to escape. He pushed Ksat on the ground and ran over and picked up a nearby Tech-9 semi-automatic handgun. Bryant ordered Wallace to drop the weapon, which he eventually did. Bryant was able to keep him restrained until police units arrived. Ksat apparently tried to lunge at Wallace while he was being restrained, which gave Bryant doubts about his innocence. But Frank explained to him properly about Ksat. Bryant would later refuse to testify. Early in employment, Frank wanted to earn some extra money. She was later assigned to do security work with her partner, Ronald Williams. Williams was described by the force as a devoted officer. He had married and had 2 children. They were assigned to do security work at a local Vietnamese restaurant in New Orleans East known as Kemp. The restaurant was owned by the Vu family. During her work of security, Frank had gotten real close to all of them. The Vus would later state that she was a real sweet woman until the incident, and Ronnie was described as a good guy. The Vus would give Frank money when she needed it, and when it was her birthday, they'd even given her presents. Sometime in late February of '95, Frank would start bringing Rogers Ksat around the restaurant. She introduced Ksat as a nephew. The pair would eat there often when Frank's shift was over. Frank had apparently gotten real angry lately because the Vus had started paying Ronald more money. The Vus had supposedly told Frank one night, likely March 2nd or 3rd, that they had recently made $25,000 from the business. Frank knew that it would make up for them paying Williams more cash than her. She began plotting the robbery with Ksat. Late on March 4th, 1995, both her and Ksat ate at the restaurant. Before they left, Frank abruptly stole the key to the building. Wdsu would later tell authorities that she wasn't able to find the key after she had let both Frank and Ksat out. Both Frank and Ksat came back to the restaurant after midnight in Frank's police unit, and they both were armed with 9mm pistols. That night, it was Ronnie's shift to do security. Wdsu was counting money when she saw Frank walking towards the entrance. Wdsu sensed something was terribly wrong and immediately hid the money in a microwave in the restaurant's kitchen. Frank entered the restaurant and pushed both Wdsu and Wdsu in through the kitchen entrance. Ronnie began following her, asking her questions when Ksat shot him through the spine. When Williams was on his back, Ksat shot him in the head and again in the spine. He then took his wallet. Frank then checked to see what was the gunshots going off behind her, giving Wdsu and Wdsu a chance to hide. They hid in the walk-in freezer in the kitchen. The Vus initially reported after the murders they could see Frank looking for something. Frank eventually cornered siblings Ha and Kuang Vu, demanding they tell her where the money was. Ha and Kuang, both on their knees in the kitchen, began begging Frank to let them leave. Frank pistol-whipped Kuang, and he eventually tells her where the money was put. Frank, satisfied about getting what she came for, then fires 9 rounds into both Ha and Kuang Vu. Frank and Ksat then leaves the restaurant, and Frank drops him off at an apartment complex. Frank and Lakaze knew that they have left a witness behind, and being a New Orleans police officer, Antoinette heard the 911 call over the police radio saying that an officer was down at the Kemp restaurant, and she returned to the scene, acting as a responding officer. Frank parked her police cruiser in the rear and entered the restaurant through the back door. Upon reaching the dining room, she finds that Chayo is waiting for help. When police arrive, Chayo rushed out of the back door and into the arms of the police officer. Frank goes outside and identifies herself as a police officer. Chayo tells Frank that she knew what she had done and explains to police that it was in fact Frank who committed the crimes. Both Chayo and Frank were questioned by officers at different tables in the restaurant. After hearing Chayo's statement, Frank was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. Lakaze was arrested and charged with murder later on that night. Antoinette Frank was taken to police headquarters where she received additional questioning and confessed to the crimes along with Lakaze. Antoinette Frank and Rogers were indicted by the Orleans Parish Grand Jury on April 28, 1995. Their trials were eventually served, and Lakaze was tried on July 17th of 1995. He was eventually found guilty and sentenced to death, which later would be commuted to a life sentence. What seriously damaged Lakaze's asserted innocence was that he'd used Williams's Chevron credit card at a Chevron station in Gretna just minutes after the murders at Kemp. Antoinette Frank's trial would begin on September 5th, 1995. The jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts. Along with Rogers Lakaze, she was recommended for the death penalty as well. She was sentenced to death on October 20th, 1995, and her death sentence was also commuted to a life sentence. And in addition, before the murders at Kemp Arms, Antoinette Frank reported to fellow police officers that her father had gone missing. Later on, after the murders, a skeleton of an unknown male was found underneath Frank's house, leading speculation that she had killed her own father and hit him with a headshot right in the middle of the head.
The clothes he had on, the white tennis, are still white today. The long sleeve shirt was no powder burn ever found on his hands, no evidence, no blood, no nothing. And they want to give him a life sentence without parole. It's like a puzzle. You can have a puzzle with 90 pieces. If one missing, something's wrong with that puzzle, right?
Roger Lakaze's conviction on 3 murder charges still stands, but his death sentence was replaced today following decades of appeals. He will now serve life in prison without parole. The convictions put Lakaze and ex-NOPD officer Antoinette Frank on death row for the last 2 decades. Frank's partner, Ronald Williams, and 2 members of a New Orleans East family were shot to death in the robbery gone wrong back in 1995.